Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Fred Zinnemann's High Noon in 1952. So here we are with another Western review, and yes, this is a rewatch. I watched it again tonight, and last year was the first time I saw High Noon. I'd been meaning to see it for many, many years. This film, of course, very, very famous, and it's very, very acclaimed. I believe this is very, very high on the Sight and Sound and AFI lists. It was nominated for 7 Oscars, I believe, and it won 4. And of course, Gary Cooper stars as Marshall Will Kane, although he's kind of, as the film opens, he's kind of about to retire. But yes, things come about, and it's clear, it's rumoured that Frank Miller, this character Frank Miller, is going to be returning on this train. Who he's basically been released from prison, and he's kind of got a past with Gary Cooper's character. Where basically, yes, when he was a marshal a few years ago, he sent this guy to prison, and yes, basically the guy Frank Miller is going to get revenge. It's clear, and 3 of his henchmen, including his brother in the film, Ben Miller, are basically at the train station, and they've been sighted and stuff. And yes, basically they're waiting for him to arrive on the 12 noon train, and the film opens with, of course, Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly getting married, and she plays Amy in the film. She is a Quaker, so she's kind of against guns and everything like that, which adds a really interesting dynamic. And yes, basically, the film, of course, very, very famous for unfolding over real time, you could say, and it's just over 80 minutes long. This film, it's not a long film, very, very, very short, and it's basically in this small town. Most of the time, it's set in this small town. It's kind of meant to be in New Mexico kind of territory, and yes, Gary Cooper is the marshal slash retired marshal, and yes, basically most of the film is him trying to get people to round up people, to kind of get ready to fend off this gang, you could say, of outlaws, and to basically save the town. But he was meant to, of course, go away with Grace Kelly. But yes, he's basically torn between his love and then, of course, his duty, you could say, his honour, and just protecting this town, these people. But this is a very, very complex film, and it doesn't pan out in the way across the film. And yes, basically very, very acclaimed. 1952, which was an amazing year, and maybe the best decade in film. And just so many great films coming out in this year, and High Noon is another one of them. I think it's a stunning film. I saw it last year, August, for the first time, and I really loved it, and I love it even more now. I think it's a very, very on paper, it's not necessarily something that would be my favourite Western. It is just in this small town and everything, and I suppose I lean towards more the adventure or big epic westerns, you could say. But this one is really an exception, where the tight location of it all, and just the very, very short runtime actually work perfectly, because it's more it's more like a thriller kind of thing. It's kind of like Rope, as well, the way it kind of pans out, and it kind of is set across a small period of time. This is real time. This pans out, and you do see the clock quite a lot in the film, which kind of becomes a character of its own. And and you kind of see as the time passes what time it is. It's really amazing that, and it just only adds to the tension, in this film. And yeah, I just think this is a wonderful Western film, and I'm not seen any Fred Zinnemann films. I don't believe he's meant to be, a director who made loads and loads of masterpieces or anything. But yes, direction in this film is stunning. I think really this is pretty much perfectly shot. It's just amazing. All the framing, the uses of close-ups, and just the way we keep seeing the kind of the train track and everything, and the kind of builds the tension in the atmosphere, and these guys that are at the at the station waiting for Frank Miller. They don't really do much in the film. They just kind of, you see them kind of talking and stuff, and hanging about, but even then, even the shots of them are so effective, and kind of just checking in on this, even though of course that Frank Miller probably won't reach the station until 12, but they're shown quite a lot, and it's just really amazingly done to kind of build that tension, to kind of remind you the inevitable, that he will show up, and they're going to of course ride into town, and there's going to be kind of shootouts, in the final act. And Lee Van Cleef, of course, plays one of these guys. He doesn't really say anything in the film, but again, he doesn't really need to. He's Lee Van Cleef, of course, was one of the greatest Western actors. Of course, he would work with Leone, and for a few dollars more, and The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and is amazing in both of them. And yes, of course, he's in quite a lot of Western films. This was probably one of his earlier roles, I believe. And yeah, basically, he's amazing in the film, even though he doesn't say anything, really. Gary Cooper is legendary in this film, really amazing. Of course, as Will Kane, and I just loved his character. I think as a protagonist, he's really amazing. It's someone that you kind of I really rooted for, and just heightened really with his relationship with Grace Kelly's character of Amy. I really loved the romance in the film. I thought it was an amazing romance. I loved how it began with the wedding, your kind of joyous occasion, and then and the rumours starts to come in and stuff, and then it's kind of all tense from then on, and it kind of it kind of just builds and builds this film. I think it's just amazing how it sustains the kind of the build up for most of the film. The film is really a build up in tension for the entire film until the very final act, you could say. It's also kind of a statement. It's kind of a character study, and just a masterclass in tension and kind of world building, you could say. Just how very, very small town, but you get to kind of know pretty much all the characters, and I really was compelled by all these characters. I think the worst character in the film is this woman that basically has a past with Will and Frank Miller. You find out, and the scenes when she was in it, were my least favourite of the film. They weren't flawed. It's just she wasn't as compared. She was quite a depressing character, so I didn't really care for her basically. But really, all she was there for was to kind of bring out different things with the other characters. So I can't flaw that. But she wasn't really someone that I really liked at all. And care for. But yes, basically, the rest of the townspeople are just really so well written, and just I loved the sense of community, and as well, it's not just all kind of kind of warm and everything because with these people, because they are as well kind of people who aren't willing to necessarily straight away help Gary Cooper's character, and a lot of them kind of they have mixed feelings towards him. It's not all just everyone tries to help kind of thing. There's a real kind of struggle, you could say, and a kind of mission. It's really hard for him to actually get people to help him, and defend this gang. And basically, yes, this film, it's just stunning from start to finish. The music as well. I loved the score, the songs used. Just so amazing. I loved how that was used in the film. It's just really, really wonderful stuff. Kind of like you could say some of the Searchers. Is actually with the music and the songs and stuff. It's really amazing. But yes, this film it's more thriller than a traditional Western, you could say. And of course, it has the elements there, of course, that a lot of Westerns do have. But really, it is more of a thriller. Kind of you could say it's more experimental, but it doesn't feel like that because it's so well directed, it's so well acted. Gary Cooper's so good. His performance is stunning. Very, very subtle at the beginning, certainly. But then it just it kind of creeps up on you. Really amazing performance, not a flaw there at all. Grace Kelly, absolutely stunning. Grace Kelly is one of my favourite actresses. She wasn't going for that long, really. She was only a few years, about 5 years, probably not even that. And I believe this is probably her first role, or one of her first roles actually. And yes, basically, she's amazing. Really adds the charm to the film, the kind of a little bit of the humour as well. She's always actually really funny in the films that I've seen from her. The Hitchcock ones I'm talking about. And yes, she's just a really amazing actress. And her character was amazing in the film. As I say, I love this romance. And then as well, you've got of course Thomas Mitchell. He basically is one of the main side characters. And he was a great actor. He's one of my favourite kind of actors. That is always kind of a side character, you could say, most of the time. He was in It's a Wonderful Life, Gone with the Wind. Two films that some of my absolute favourites, and he always adds the kind of warmth and the charm to films. But in this, it's kind of a bit of a different role, you could say, for him. But he's amazing, and just just loved even, the actor that played Frank Miller, and just I loved how this kind of this legend built up around this character. Even though he's not really, it's not really the kind of myth making that's traditional. It's he's kind of named and shamed. He's not really told in any light that is kind of, yes, mythic, but he is, the exposition, relating to this character still builds him up to be this kind of a character that when he does appear, it's kind of this big event, and it's really amazing. When he does show up, and basically, this film really is quite flawless. I think it just such a masterclass in tension. The shots, of course, are just wonderful in this film. The way that Zinnemann kind of builds this atmosphere, through the visuals. Of course, the music, is great, and the use of that, and I just loved, everything about this film. I loved pretty much all the characters. I think, it's just how tense this film is, but also how warm it is, and the way it kind of, all the people in the town, are kind of vital, and they kind of, it just builds up this kind of community. And, it's not always, it doesn't always go according to plan. And then, of course, you have the final act, and I love how this is set across kind of real time. This film, and then when you get to the final act, once, of course, Miller comes into town, it does not disappoint. I'm not going to ruin it, but yes, what an amazing final act. It doesn't lose. It's quite hard. The fact that this was built up, so much. It could have been a disappointing final act, but it wasn't for me personally. And then, of course, it kind of makes it more satisfying. The fact that it's been this massive build up for about an hour of the film at least, and yes, basically the final act was just amazing. It's just the way the shootouts happened and everything. It didn't lose the momentum, you could say, and it's just everything came together wonderfully. This film really doesn't waste a shot. It's just amazing, and I loved, of course, the way the kind of time plays into it. It becomes kind of a character, and it kind of affects the entire film. It's not just a gimmick, and really. Directed to perfection, and just everything about this film I loved. I say I don't love that character really that was in the film. One of the side characters, but it wasn't bad or anything. It's just a character I cared for the scenes with her and less, but still, she was in a couple of scenes, and it wasn't bad or anything. It's just that she wasn't a character that I liked at all or cared for. It was a bit depressing, her character, but yes, this film really is flawless. I think. It is a masterpiece for me. I agree. It's one of the best westerns. Not in my top 10 for me personally. And this is sometimes said to be one of the best, the very best. It has been called the best western of all time. I don't quite agree with that. It's nowhere near for me personally on the level. Say The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and stuff like that. But it is really a flawless western. One that is full of heart, there's great characters, very, very complex actually, this film. It starts off, really joyous and kind of warm, and then of course, a lot of the characters, in the town kind of act in cold ways to Gary Cooper's character, and you've got kind of a really layered narrative, you could say, and it's a very, very short film, but it really manages to kind of portray all the characters wonderfully. And this whole arc, and the kind of way that Gary Cooper's character is torn between, these different things, and just the themes that are present in this film, and kind of what it stands for, and just how brave, this character is, but he's kind of this ruthless guy, and you could say, not really an anti-hero, but yeah, in some ways he kind of is, but yes, basically, love this character, love this protagonist, and for me it is a masterpiece. It doesn't get into my plus tiers quite, but really this is definitely on my favourite films list of all time. I would recommend it highly, and I'd have to give it 100%. It's an absolute masterpiece. It just really works on every level, and it's just the one that comes together wonderfully. It's got the perfect kind of setup, and the tension that is kind of tapped into. With this clock, kind of showing the clocks, the setup of this kind of this just one event really, and this small town. There's a couple of moments where you see outside of the town, but really it is in this town, and the fact that it's sustained throughout the entire film. It's really just amazing, and you know, when it does, you know, when the train does arrive, you know, the final act, as I say, does not disappoint. You've got a very, very kind of shiver-worthy ending. You know, I absolutely got goosebumps at the ending. It's just amazing. The use of music is so stunning in this film, and just the way it's shot, edited, everything, perfection really. I think this is a stunning film, and it's definitely in my favourite films list. One of the best westerns. Not quite top 10 material westerns, but you know, it's not miles off of that for me from what I've seen, and a legendary film. You know, not the best film of 1952. But yes, one of the many masterpieces, of the 50s. And it's just, the 50s was such a great decade, and it's just amazing. You kind of, you're always discovering more and more just masterpieces from the 50s, and this is one of them. You know, there's a lot of films from this decade on my favourite films list, very, very high, you know, and it had everything really, you know, you could say, and all these directors, and then you've got these one-off films, you know, kind of westerns were great, of course, as proven here, and of course with The Searchers, you know, that I've already reviewed, and yeah, it's just a stunning film, a great time for film, wow, and yeah, absolutely loved it from start to finish, would highly recommend it, and yeah, it's the one that's really, really, you know, kind of thoroughly compelling and fully tension throughout, and it just kind of doesn't disappoint, you know, when it does reveal. And yeah, thanks for watching my review, and of course many more westerns to come. And of course I'm doing more now, you know, kind of into the winter months, you could say, and stuff. And yeah, basically one of my favourite genres, and this is another masterpiece within that. So thanks for watching my review of High Noon.